Hey there guys, welcome back to the Doug and Racecraft YouTube channel. There's two things I'm really good at in life. That's fabricating and masturbating. And in this video, I'm gonna show you how to do one of those things. Okay, so before we get into it, not a whole lot of house cleaning in this episode. We're just gonna get right into it, get right into the action. This one's pretty simple. Started with 11 to 14 exhaust manifolds, lopped all the tubes off just to use those flanges because they're nice thick flanges, very thick. Went ahead and used some 1 3/4 mild steel bends that I had laying around from the last time I did the 4/6 swap into this. Went ahead and made some new headers, and we'll just show you how it went. So we begin this video on the driver's side. As you can see, I got this header basically all the way down. The only thing we still have to do is to put the collector on at the bottom side. This side was by far probably the hardest side of the two to do, mainly because of the steering shaft. As you can see, it goes through right here. So the steering shaft goes in between the tubes for cylinder 6 and cylinder 8, pictured here. Cylinder 5 and cylinder 7 run around the back side. Obviously 5 up and around and down the back side, and 7 it comes out, kicks around the steering shaft around the back side. So I'm pretty happy with how this came out. I did end up welding all this stuff out myself, hand-tigged everything. Not my best welds, but my big focus with this project is to try and do everything on my own, just to challenge myself to develop my skill set. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how everything came out. The biggest thing that I can preach when it comes to something like this is preparation. You may see a nice set of headers or exhaust or anything fabricated and see some nice welds on it and think, man, I wish I could learn how to weld like that. But with a lot of things, the preparation is key, just like body work. If you put down a silky smooth paint job on shitty body work, you're obviously gonna see it and you're not gonna be impressed with the result. And the same goes for here. If you don't have good pipe fitment, if you don't clean the pipes up before you weld them, you're gonna have shitty pipes. So, okay, so as you can see here, this is the passenger side. Obviously don't have this side all the way done yet. That's what we're gonna do in this video. So, as I said previously, I think it was in my last video I said this, I had already started on this header, and this header is largely unchanged from the way that it was in that video, except for this tube here. This is cylinder number 2. It basically came straight out and was almost touching the control arm right here. And obviously once it got a little bit of heat in it, I don't want it to melt these bushings. So I ended up kicking it up a little bit with some pipes, some U-bends, cut that off. I think maybe 10-degree bend to kick it up enough. Keeping it nice and basically straight with this, just for aesthetics basically. We will bring it around this corner here and then down with the other groups of pipes down there. Pretty simple stuff. I'm not gonna show you guys everything because then this would be a 3-hour long video. And I don't think any of us want that. So basically I'm just gonna show you guys the highlights of what we do here. We'll put it on a time lapse and I weld everything together, and then we'll wrap this video up. As far as prep goes, as I said before, prep is what makes a good set of headers. So the way that these tubes are coming are like this. They're just raw mild steel with like a mill scale on them still. So all I've been doing, you can either scuff it up with a Scotch-Brite, sand it, whatever you wanna do. I've been throwing them in the sandblasting cabinet and then wire wheeling them down to polish them up a little bit. That's what leads them to look like that. And here is the finished product. As you can see, it's a little bit shinier than the other stuff. Weld's really nice. If you try to TIG weld through mill scale, you'll just have a bad time. You'll have dirty welds and everything like that. So that's what I've been doing for prep. All right, so to add a little bit of panache to my production quality here, we went ahead and put the engine drivetrain on my patent pending COYOTE drivetrain jig, which is my Harbor Freight jack with a homemade jack support, and then hanging from the engine hoist. It is OSHA approved, so go ahead and send me an email if you'd be interested in one of these setups. So as I said before, I'm just going to show you a little bit of what we got going on here. What we're going to do here is take it around this curve and line up with the rest of these pipes. Then we will straighten this out under the car and add the collector. I'm sure there's an easier, more scientific way to do this, but I just haven't found it yet. So I'm just eyeballing this stuff. So I know to go around this corner, it's got to have a little bit of a bend, probably a 45, and then it's got to have another bend kicking up. So, got myself some bends here. I already got a little bit added onto this one, so I know this one's going to come around the bend like this. Something like that. And then one of these are pretty much a 45 basically. We'll come around like this. give her a little whoop-de-doo, something like that. Bam, perfect. Like I said, I'm sure there's a way to measure this, but I just haven't done this enough yet to figure that out. And I just know that this works for me. So what works for me may not work for you. If you have any ideas, please go ahead and let me know in the comments down below. So we're gonna go ahead and get the MIG welder over here. We're gonna get these tacked up and we'll keep going. Okay, as you can see, we got it tacked up. I'm not gonna say it's just that easy because, well, I think this is easy. Some of you may not agree. It's hard to explain. When I see something like this, I can just see how I want everything to go, and it's really hard for me to put into words for you guys how I did that. So like, on this side, like I said, I knew that I needed to avoid that upper control arm. On the passenger side, there really wasn't a whole lot of issues we had to avoid. On the driver's side, obviously I had that steering shaft. My only advice to you if you're gonna do something like this is start with the hardest tube. And it all depends, it's all platform specific on what issues you have and everything like that. And like I said, I used factory flanges, which already had like the kick up for the top here. And you know, I left some of these bends on. You could cut them off straight, grind the welds out and just use the flanges, or you could buy new flanges for $100 to $200. But I like this. I like the way that this is gonna end up working out. So that's what I did, but that's not what you have to. Another thing I'd like to point out, I used to have an S550 Mustang. It was 2015 with a Roush blower on it. I wanna say they were 1 7/8" JBA headers. And for anybody who's done headers on a modular car or on a Coyote car, you know how big of a pain in the ass it is. The motor's gotta get jacked up, motor mounts have to come out and everything. It's a huge ordeal. It takes 8 to 10 hours at least. The first time I did it, me and a friend of mine, it took us probably 12 hours if I had to guess. And the biggest part about that is where they have the bolts. So like they have tubes going in front of where the bolts are. So you have to use a wrench and get it a 1/16 of a turn at a time, and it takes you half an hour to put one bolt in because you gotta stop and let your arm rest and then keep going and then move on to another one because you're tired of dealing with that one. So what I did when I made these is I laid out where all the bolts are, because I'm using bolts instead of the studs because it just works out a little bit better with the bolts because they have a smaller head, so you use a smaller socket. But all of these bolts on both sides, you can come straight in with a socket on all of them. And I didn't make any sacrifices in terms of, you know, where I wanted the pipes and everything to go. It just so happened to work out that I was able to do it that way. Why other companies don't do that, I honestly will never understand, because if I can make it work with the constraints that I have, some of the narrowest frame rails that you'll ever see a Coyote motor going into, why they can't make it work with a Fox or an S550. So, just my 2 cents, but we're gonna go ahead. I might leave the engine out of the car to do the bends to go for the collector, or I might do it on the stand. We'll see. Maybe I feel like breaking my legs when this falls off the stand. Who knows? Okay, so it's been a couple days. As you can see, a couple things have changed. After I got this tube finished up, like you guys saw in the last clip, I ended up putting it in the car and started planning out how I was gonna do the tubes to go down for the collector in here somewhere. I realized initially the way that these 4 pipes would have been clocked would have been, instead of being being square with the, you know, with the drive line here, they were at like a diamond angle. So they were basically clocked 45 degrees. The problem with that is it's really hard to get them to twist into and come down and to meet into here. It just takes a lot more work than it's probably worth. So I ended up coming back in here, just chipping it over the last couple days. I ended up shortening this pipe here and extending it right in this joint here. And then basically running it over this pipe, the pipe for cylinder number 1. And that squared this up. So then what I ended up doing here was I cut this joint here, put a S in it, and then we will also kick it back down using this pipe here. So as you can see, that's going to tack in there really nice, line up with that. We will 45 it to meet up with the other pipes. And then the same thing is going to have to happen here. I just cut probably a 3-inch leg off of this one here. We'll just have to S it and then do the same angle the way down. So obviously that's the downside to doing something like this. Obviously, if you were able to draw this in a CAD system or something, you would know where everything needed to go, be able to map out all your bends and everything like that. Unfortunately, I don't have that luxury, so here we are, but no big deal. We'll make the best of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this pipe tacked on, and then we're gonna start cutting this stuff here, and we'll catch back up. All right, to make a long story short, I ended up just finishing up this header. Really wasn't anything that special. You guys really didn't miss a whole lot. What I ended up doing here, shortening this tube here. This here was a 90 that I split to make 245s. to kick it out and then kick it back. This piece here was the offcut of this piece here. It's pretty simple, 45'd out. Obviously these are all longer. What I'll end up doing here is welding all the tubes up, welding them back to the flanges, and then tacking these together and then cutting them off square with my trusty 30-year-old chop saw. Worked fine for the other one, so it should work fine for this one as well. The big thing to focus on here, before I put you guys on the time lapse, is heat control. I'm gonna TIG weld these together. I TIG welded the other one, and it came out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. When you're doing these, you got to basically, it's kind of like doing sheet metal work. If you've ever done sheet metal work, what'll happen is if you put too much heat into these bends, they want to straighten out, and I have had that happen before. Even when I did that Cobra, when I welded those down pipes up, I didn't think it really mattered with pipe, but with pipe it's almost worse. It's so weird. You put so much heat into that radius, and when it cools down, it wants to pull that angle back out of it and straighten it out. So you really got to be careful of that. I really don't want to have to go back and cut these out, and I got really lucky when I did the other side. So basically just hopping around a lot. I will grind down all these tacks before I weld these together. I still have to clean on some mill scale here, around here. Okay, so we got our beautiful header here. First thing we're gonna go ahead and do is I just have these pipes tacked to the flanges, so I'm gonna go ahead and grind those tacks off. Only reason I'm grinding all these tacks off, take these tubes off the flange, is to weld them up individually. So if you have the other 3 tubes out of the way, there's nothing stopping you from welding up that final tube that's still attached to that flange. After that, we're gonna go ahead and get the welder fired up, and we're gonna start buzzing some stuff up. Okay, so we got all the tubes welded up, and now I'm in the process of welding the tubes back onto the flanges. When I first started this, I had all of them tacked on to their initial pipes, and then clamped down here to make sure that they were all going to meet up, that nothing tweaked or anything like that. And then now I'm going in and welding these in one at a time. So obviously this one I did before all the other pipes were on, because this one never got detached from the flange. I did this one next. They were decent, but not the best. So we're just gonna go ahead and pretend like that didn't happen. Starting to do the tube for cylinder 2. Got it tacked in, as you can see. Gonna go ahead and weld this up all the way around. Obviously, don't want to miss anything. The spots that I can TIG, I will TIG, but the spots that I can't get to with the TIG torch and filler rod, we're gonna go ahead and just MIG weld and then clean it up a little bit. So nothing too serious here. I'm gonna go ahead and get all this stuff welded up, and then we will cut this off, and then we'll pick it up from there. The last thing we're gonna go ahead and do, like I said, cut these pipes off here, and then put it in the car and aim the collector. Just make sure that both collectors are pointing in somewhat the same direction, and that everything we've done to this point is still going to work. Okay, so as you can see, we got the header in. Got the control arm on just to make sure that I'm not going to come in contact with anything here. No big deal there. Just got a couple bolts in the flange because kind of a pain in the ass to get to. I was able to get the header in without having to jack the motor up, but on the other side, it does have to get jacked up a little bit. It sucks, but it is what it is. I mean, nothing we can really do about it. It's just, you know, part of it when it comes to doing stuff like this. It's a big motor and a little car. So let's go ahead and go down underneath, and we will start doing the collector. Okay there, guys, so we're under the car. Got my trusty collector here. As you can see, I got the driver's side collector tucked up a little bit behind the transmission crossmember. What's basically going to end up happening, either I'm going to section this and kick it up a little bit. I don't think that's going to work, but what will probably end up happening, I'll just put a little dimple into the tube for the X-pipe. Really not going to be that big of a deal. It should work just fine. So, I'm going to put my collector up on here. I've already got the plug welded in for in between the 4 tubes where they meet up. I also welded the joints of the tubes, where the tubes touch. That, for somebody who's inexperienced, that would be one of the first things I would forget if I didn't have prior experience. So just because those tubes are touching does not mean those tubes are going to seal. In a carbureted application, may not be that big of a deal. But what's going to end up happening is it's going to pull air in from the outside, and that's going to throw off your O2 sensor readings. So for a fuel injected setup, it is absolutely key to have a good sealed up header, good sealed up connections and everything like that. So do not forget to weld where those tubes touch. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this up here. Not a whole hell of a lot to it. This collector is a little bit further back than the driver's side one is, only by like an inch or two. Not a whole lot, nothing worth crying over. I'm just gonna eyeball it really to make sure that it looks fine. Off camera, I will throw a level on this just to make sure they're pretty close side to side. Doesn't have to be completely level. If anything, I'd like them pointing down to get under the cross member. But I also don't want them to hit off the ground, because as of now, these are the lowest part of the chassis besides this part of the transmission cross member. And I don't want to crush this exhaust. So, not that it should ever get that close, but you know, it is what it is. So, I kind of like where it's at right there. I'm gonna go ahead and tack it in. All right, that should be on there good. I'm gonna go ahead and give it the obligatory, that's not going anywhere. So let's go ahead and take the header back out, get it welded up on the bench, and we'll wrap this video up. All right, so we got the header out of the car, just affixed in my trusty vise here. So these tubes didn't end up being exactly square, you know, like all four tubes nice and neat next to each other. These two tubes on the outside here were out a little bit, so these two inner tubes were pushed together. Not gonna make a difference here. This isn't a high performance race motor, even though it kind of is. So it's a snug fit on these ones, you know, ironically, because this collector fits like garbage. The other one was even worse than this. If I remembered what brand this was, I would tell you not to buy it. But I don't remember, because I bought this stuff over a year ago. So I'm going to go ahead and weld the parts where it's tight first. So I'll put a nice bead here and on the other side. And then I will use my trusty little torch here. It'll get it just hot enough that I can use the old Tanya Harding here to go ahead and make this a nice snug fit. So I guess it's all over but the crying. If my vise would tighten up. I guess not. Okay, that's cool. Whatever. Oh my god. Sweet. All right. Gonna go ahead and get her stuck together. With that being said, I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna go ahead and do this off camera, and then we'll pick it up from there. All right, as you can see, got the collector welded on. Came out pretty solid, pretty happy with how everything turned out. All the welds came out pretty decent. Not my best welding, but you know, it'll get the job done. The benefit of hindsight, it's easy to see things now that I would have changed, now that I'm at the tail end of this, which is obviously why they call it hindsight. A couple things that I do differently when I go back to do these in stainless eventually, not for a while because I'm kind of tired doing this kind of stuff, but like this tube here could probably be straight. I know that the ear for the starter for the bell housing is somewhere in here, which is why it has that little whoop-de-doo. They are a mirror to the other side. Let me get the other side up here. Okay, so here's the other header. As I said, they're mirrors of each other for the most part. These two tubes come down. The two back tubes go down over there. The other tubes go up and around. Only difference being, aside from the steering shaft going through right here, because there's not two steering shafts, is the way that the tubes go into the collector. So like the back cylinder, which would be cylinder 4 in this case, goes into, we'll call it the bottom right. Whereas on this side, it goes into the top left. So basically everything's turned. Each tube is oriented 90 degrees out from the other one, which is negligible. I mean, it's the only difference that makes is just being able to say that they're mirrors of each other. It doesn't make a performance difference, anything like that. So now that we got all that taken care of, let's go ahead and wrap this video up. Initially, I was gonna also try and do the exhaust in this video too. Just get the exhaust down to the point of the axle, do the X-pipe, and then the mufflers. The mufflers that I got are the same mufflers that I used for the GT. They're a Cook's race muffler. They're an oval case, 3-inch in, 3-inch out. They're a 4.5-inch case by a 7.5-inch case. So should sound pretty good. Cook's also makes the same exhaust system for an 18 and up Mustang. I'm pretty sure they make it for a 15 and up actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But same difference. I like the way it sounds. It's very throaty, not too raspy, which is a drawback of the Coyote exhaust. Not a lot of drone down low, but it screams up top, which is kind of the ideal situation. You want it to be quiet driving around and scream when you're on it. So that's what we got going on there. This video is already getting kind of long, so I decided not to do that. We'll do that later on. I do apologize for how long it took me to get this video out. It was a lot colder this January than I anticipated it being. We've had a lot of sub-zero days here. Right now it's actually pretty warm. It warmed up 40 degrees from where it was yesterday. The sad part about that is it's 25 today. So we had a pretty cold day yesterday. Also working full time again, so it's really hard for me to get up here at the end of the day, get up early every morning, so I don't have a whole lot of time at night to be able to work on this. So just working on it when I can. In these headers, I probably have over 40 hours. Started them last year about this time, right before Christmas last year is when I stopped working on them, and then finished them now. So all in all, probably have about 40 hours, and that's, you know, on the weekends, after work when I can. So progress is slow and steady, but now we're to the point where I need to start buying stuff again. So while I'm ordering parts for that, we are going to start working on the LTD again. I got a lot of good stuff coming in the LTD, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm not going to give away too much, but it's going to be a really good story. It should be very wholesome. So after we finish up the LTD, we're going to obviously go back to the King Cobra again. Got a lot of good stuff coming with that. I got a good set of wheels for my friend Jeremy, so huge shout out to Jeremy for this. They're a set of Weld RTSs. Here's one of them here, as you can see. The only drawback to these wheels is that they are a Chevy pattern, which isn't a big deal because with it being a 9-inch and a Mustang II front suspension, they make more Chevy stuff for them than they do Ford stuff, ironically. So we'll just do Granada brakes up front with the Chevy bolt pattern, nothing serious there. And then the axles that I'll get for the rear end are dual pattern, so they'll be 4.5-inch Ford, as well as the 4 3/4-inch for a Chevy pattern. So I could put a normal set of wheels on this if I want to. They are going to be bigs and littles, meaning slicks and skinnies. So in the rear, it's going to be a 15 by 10-inch wheel with 4.5 inches of back spacing, and in the front, it's gonna be a 4.5-inch wheel with like 2 inches of back spacing, whatever that ends up being. But you may notice with that back spacing number for the rear, that's a lot of lip, and it is a lot of lip. So we're gonna have to end up narrowing the rear end, which isn't that big a deal. It's not that expensive, just kind of time consuming. I'll show you how to do that because there's not a whole lot of videos about narrowing 9 inches. There's a lot about putting 9-inch ends on an 8.8 Ford rear end, but not a whole lot of 9-inch stuff out there. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna go ahead and fill that void because that's one thing I'm really good at, is filling voids. And then hopefully after that, we're gonna get into the engine stuff. So just a quick recap. Next video is gonna be LTD. Next 1 or 2 videos will be about the LTD. And then after that, back on the King Cobra again. So with all that being said, I think we're gonna go ahead and end this video off. Like the video if you like the video. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more of this content. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Y'all take care now.